Every great garden begins with a question not shouted but whispered beneath the soil, a question not about how fast you can grow or how much you can earn, but how deeply you are willing to listen to the land, to the rhythm of leaves and the silent music of roots in Grow a Garden. That question follows you from the very first moment your boots touch the untouched plot. It follows you through your early plantings, through your mistakes and your wonder, until it finally leads you here to a moment where you no longer see each plant as a single choice, but as a note in a wide. It begins in the stillness. Just after you arrange your first patch, you stand back, feeling the soil beneath your avatar, and you wonder what would happen if you planted side by side, not just for yield, but for synergy. If one crop leaned into another, if some needed shade and others sun, if rhythm could be found not only in single plants, but in how they grow together. So you plant the carrots next to the mushrooms. Not because someone told you this is optimal, but because you sense contrast: carrots steady, mushrooms fast, and suddenly something in their rhythm matches theirs, and yours. The garden becomes richer, not in layout, but in movement, the way leaves of one plant brush against the stalks of another, almost as if they knew they belonged there together. You add fruit trees near root crops. You watch how the taller branches cast shade and how the roots below lean into that space, moving water, drawing depth from soil newly softened by shade. And you realize this is not just planting, this is composing a garden symphony. Each seed a note, each plot a chord. The ground tilts gently between rows when you choose combinations that respect each other's needs. The compost from one scatters nutrients, another soaks them up. The wind breezes through layers, not hitting all at once, but flowing path by path, soft and alive like orchestration, not chaos. Day by day you water, you tend, you walk between the plots, and you start to notice pairs that work like companions. One crop protecting another from weeds, another boosting the color or size of its neighbor, not through stats, but through interaction, through presence, through unseen cooperation. Mistakes happen. You plant two types that fight for the same nutrients. The roots trap the water, the leaves tangle, and you learn to move them apart, to shift their rhythm. And the lesson stays with you not as frustration, but as growth. You remember how each crop needs space and respect, and your garden becomes richer, not just in yield, but in understanding. And then after weeks of planting, pairing, grouping, you look out across your land and see patterns of growth, not measured in crates, but in fullness. In color, in depth, in rhythm. You see how certain combinations turned faster harvests into steadier ones, how others made your harvests feel more abundant, not by volume, but by vibrancy. You begin talking to new farmers, telling them about the hidden power not in single species, but in their combinations. You describe rows where leafy crops shade roots, where fruit trees circle vegetables, creating circles of fertility, where each plot holds more value than the sum of its parts. You learn that the best crop combinations are not always obvious. Some pairings bloom together elegantly, others demand attention, their growth fragile, but when cared for carefully, they produce rewards that feel earned, not accidental. Their layout teaching you rhythm, their cycles teaching you timing, their bloom teaching you balance. You experiment, placing climb vines near low plants near thirsty roots, water loving near sun lovers, and each test becomes a conversation with the earth, not a formula to beat, but a lesson in listening. Now your plantings are not random, they are intentional. They are stories you write row by row, season by season, cycle by cycle. Your garden grows not just in plant count, but in meaning, in memory, in melody. The sound of wind rushing past leaves in layers, the scent of mixing blossoms in breeze, the way fruit from one bed falls near the roots of another, like a blessing given and received quietly, deeply. And then the result comes not as a flash, not as a scoreboard, but as a garden that breathes and walks and lives like a place you built, not out of speed, but out of soul. And the harvest feels different, not just because of the color or texture or fullness, but because it speaks of care, of creativity, of composition, not convenience. You walk through it slowly, your avatar passing through rows you planted days ago with new understanding, each patch singing its notes in harmony in your hands and your heart. And as you collect crate by crate, you feel not just reward, but resonance. The garden rewarding more than effort, it responds to intention. When players ask which crop combination is best, you do not give them a chart, you describe to them a feeling, a pattern, a palette of plants that grows together. You guide them to find combinations that fit their rhythm, their space, their style, not just profit, but presence. This is how the garden becomes more than a game. It becomes a living song, not a song that plays from speakers or screens, but one that hums quietly through the patterns you shape and the decisions you make. The garden becomes your instrument, your brush, your stage. And with each seed you plant, you compose a line. With each pairing, you sketch a scene. With every harvest, you raise the curtain on a play that unfolds in green and gold and scent and silence. It is not about lining up numbers or chasing a leaderboard. It is about how things fit together, how one sprout leans into another, how roots intertwine below where the eye cannot see, how Leaves from one crop arch over another like guardians. It is the way flowers bloom, not only upward, but outward, making space for their neighbors, the way moisture clings longer in shaded soil, the way light finds its path through layers of color and shape. And you realize then that you are not just farming, you are designing a living, breathing thing. Architecture, yes, but not the kind of blueprints and rulers. It is an architecture of instinct, of noticing when one plant lifts another, or when one struggles and needs to be moved. It is the art of angles, the curve of your paths, the flow of your watering, the breath of wind as it moves through corn and cabbage and vine. It is the symmetry of success, not measured in profit, but in presence. In how full the garden feels, not because you filled it, but because you filled it well. And art, yes, oh yes, it becomes art, because you start seeing not just what to plant, but why, because some colors beside each other feel like sunrise and some rose bend in a way that makes your plot feel like a forest path, not a square grid, because there is beauty in placing a bright burst of flowers near the sturdy greens, not to harvest, but to bless the soil around them. The best crop combinations are not written in guides, they are discovered by hands that care, by eyes that notice, by players who listen not just to tips, but to the silence between harvests. The best combinations are not the ones that yield the most in the shortest time, but the ones that teach you how to be patient, how to observe, how to trust the process, how to make space for both growth and rest. So plant side by side, not just because it is efficient, but because it allows one plant to lean into the other, to shelter it, to support it, to create something that is stronger together than either would be alone. Plant in cycles, not just to reset timers, but to follow rhythms, the natural breathing of the land, when it wants to wake, when it wants to sleep, when it calls for roots, and when it calls for bloom. Plan in melody, because the land is listening, and your movements, your water, your care, they each send out vibrations. And when you plant with intention, the melody becomes sweeter and the plants grow more in tune with each other. They begin to move as one field, not many. They begin to echo your rhythm, not resist it, not mechanics, no, not clicks and commands, but harmony and attention. Because when you nurture pairings, you nurture story. You make the crops not just data, but characters who speak to each other across soil, who rise together, who rest together. You find yourself watching not for the timer, but for the tone of the leaves, the lean of the stems, the sigh of the soil. Seek harmony, not haste, because the garden does not reward rush, it rewards rhythm. And you will find that maximum harvest profit comes not just from clever layouts, but from care, from tuning into something deeper than tips and tricks, something rooted, something old, something quieted. Comes from resonance, from that soft echo that answers when you plant with heart, from rhythm, the kind that cannot be charted, but must be felt, and from the quiet beauty of plants grown together in the way they were made to grow, reaching not just toward the sun, but toward each other and toward you. And in that moment, you realize the garden has grown not only because of what you did, but because of how you did it, with intention, with presence, with grace. And the garden becomes more than a field of crops. It becomes an extension of your spirit, a reflection of your choices, a testament to what can be made when mechanics are guided by meaning. You do not need numbers to know what you have built. You only need to walk through it slowly one morning after a long night of planting, and see how it moves, how it breathes, how it holds everything you gave it and gives it back in return, not as score, but as peace, as joy, as a feeling that stays with you long after the screen fades to black. Would you like the next part to explore how seasons shift this relationship, or how weather patterns shape deeper connections between crop pairings? I can continue building the world around your story.